Remember those days when we enjoyed show and tell at school?
Sure.
Yay, there's an audience out there. So I've always enjoyed that concept of show and tell. And as a communication architect, what I do with my clients is help them bring show and tell to their sales process, help them engage their prospects, help the decision-making easy for their buyers, and close more deals and have more fun. So what I'd like to do is share some ideas with you today, talk about why show and tell is important, and also give you some ideas that hopefully you can apply to your business. So let's imagine this is a schoolroom and I'm doing show and tell. And I'm bringing to you my baseball signed by Ralph Branca. And if we were doing a real show and tell, I might have that ball in my hand, I might toss it around the room, and you would see that stitching on the ball, maybe some dirt spots from the baseball diamond on the ball, the handwriting, you'd be able to take a look at that. You'd be able to hold it in your hand and see what that's like, how small it is, smaller than I expected. This is great analogy for selling products, right? If we're selling products, then people can experience them, we can demonstrate, they can hold them. But many of us are selling services. How many of us sell services? Okay, most of us here in the room sell services. Services are an intangible, right? So how do we do show and tell for the intangible? The show is missing. Many of us, what we do when we're selling our services, we talk about them. So how do we show services and intangibles? So let me give you an example, because when we're only telling, we can often have some miscommunications. So when I say, great catch, what are you thinking? What's on your mind? Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind. A great catch, George Clooney, right? But some of you might be thinking, hey, it's a great catch. Or some of you might have just sent something to the printers and you're thinking, oh, that typo was a great catch. So these are some of the miscommunications that happen, and keep in mind that 65% of us are visual learners. Not only that, did you know that we process visuals 60,000 times faster than text? So if you had the choice between these two visuals or leave-behinds, which one would you choose? Which is the one that we can understand faster? And aren't we always into speed? Like, how can we get those buying decisions to happen faster, more quickly? Well, perhaps if our buyers can understand what we're selling faster, that would help. This is the show and tell we have with our prospects. We meet with them and we talk with them about our services. Which would we rather have? A talk piece on the right that we can actually, it doesn't give them all the information, it's the headlines about what our process is. And we can talk through that with them. We can ask great questions. We can have a dialogue. We start to engage our prospects. In this situation, how would you discuss a printed page of information? And we talk about having a leave behind, but what is that leave behind? Are they ever going to read it? If we have a discussion with them and we're engaging them, we're getting one step closer to that buying decision. We're actually building trust in this moment. We're starting to build a relationship. Now, one thing we don't want to do is give all the information away, right? We don't want to tell them everything, otherwise they wouldn't need to hire us. I remember the first proposal I did years ago. for a client, and it was like 20 pages. I put all my ideas in the proposal, and then I couldn't figure out why she didn't hire me, you know? So keep in mind when you're doing a visual piece, the goal is to make it the tip of the iceberg. We want our prospects to be curious about what we're doing so that we can engage them. So here's a good example of a talk piece. It doesn't give you all the information. If someone were to get this without my client, they might not understand the whole thing, right? But when they meet with the client and they have this dialogue, this conversation, and they can be looking at it together, that's key. Because really what we want is we want to convey our value to our prospects. The value is sometimes overlooked, and when people challenge us on price, it's usually because they don't understand the value. So now I'm going to give you some examples of things that you can create for your show and tell for your businesses, and they're in several different categories. The first one is the preview. So you know how we all love movie trailers, right? We probably wouldn't invest in a movie if we didn't see the trailer first. So why would we buy services if we didn't know what to expect? So some of these pieces are exactly that. They're helping us understand, in this case, that there's a linear process, a setup, etc., and then there's a cyclical, ongoing process. There's some testimonials at the bottom. This client said that this piece gives his clients peace of mind and increases closing rates. Here's another piece that is a talk piece. In this case, you'll see there's some blanks, which can be filled in when you're meeting with a prospect, and it makes it a personalized process, right? Because don't we say we always personalize our services? Well, how would a prospect understand that? This is a great way to do that. And this client says that this piece helps me close more business without really selling. So the real reason that preview and helping your prospects understand the process is so important is that 95% of buyers choose the seller who helps them navigate. If you can help them navigate and understand what to expect, help them make the decision easier, do some of the work for them, you're going to have a better chance of closing that sale. So here are a couple of examples that we did. For this client, this is a CEO forum, and we're asking the CEOs to invest some time. Well, how much time, right? Why do we let them figure out what the time is? So over here, we actually calculated no more than 4% of your time each month. Now, doesn't that make it easier for the CEO to weigh, okay, maybe I can invest 4% of my time each month in this monthly meeting and get all the benefits. Rather than a process, this visual is actually talking more about benefits and value. Okay, here's another one where initially this career management cycle that this company uses was just 4 steps. What we did was we added this 5th step. The 5th step is your ongoing services. Every time you develop a service program, don't forget to add on that 5th step. To continue that relationship, because there are services for maintaining. And this company got an email back from one of their clients that said, great representation of how you provide value. Okay, another example is the before and after. So has anyone watched Fixer Upper? And they have the big reveal, isn't that great? Well, the number one thing that turned my business around a few years ago was when I was showing my portfolio and I added the before pieces. When I added the before pieces and they could see what I started with, and then they could see the finished product, then the light bulbs went off for my buyers. They really understood it. But another way that you can use the before and after for your business is the before and after value. So here's an example where we've listed, here's where the company, the prospect's company is today, vulnerable. And here's where they can be with high performance tomorrow. And this is the training services that will create the bridge for closing that gap. So that's another way you can take a look at where your client is today, where they want to be tomorrow, and how your services can bridge that gap. Another way to do a show and tell is a comparison. How do you compare apples and oranges if you're a buyer? How do you differentiate? There are ways to do some of these visuals that might not include graphics. In this case, what we did were 3 columns showing here's in-house services, here's a typical competitor, and now here's how this company stands out and sets themselves apart. The last one is the taste test. So those of us who love wine, we probably wouldn't want to buy a case of wine until we had tasted it, right? So the same thing with our services. So there are ways that we can do that with creating workshops, seminars, public speaking. That's another way to do a show and tell of what you have to offer and develop that trust. So now I'd like to throw out this challenge. What will your show and tell be? Will it be a preview, a before and after, a comparison, a taste test? As your communication architect, I'm confident there are ways we can take your intangibles and turn them into a show and tell tangible. So if you're serious about closing more sales, engaging your buyers, and having more fun doing it, then let's set up a meeting and work on your show and tell. Thanks. Any questions?
I'm just a Cynthia, I'm not a very visual person, but one of the things I noticed as you were showing examples there is that when I saw a graphic that had a circular pattern, my mind just shut down. But ones where I saw an arrow pointing in a given direction, so I knew which way to go, I was more intrigued and more likely to engage in that. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that difference exists, but that's something I just noticed.
Well, that's good to know, and it's also a good point about you wouldn't want to use these visuals as a leave behind. They're really more of an aid in the selling process. You want to have a conversation about them. And it's really counterproductive if you're just handing it out without that conversation. The whole point is to get the conversation.
I'd like to just give some unsolicited props to Cynthia. I've been working with Cynthia now for about 3 years, and one of the instruments that she displayed up there is something I use within my practice. And exactly what she posted up there, my quote to her was, "This allows me to sell my process of helping individuals get well, but without actually engaging in selling. It makes it effortless. And it also takes the intangible services that I do within my practice and gives me a flow so that I'm not missing pieces, so that I make sure I include steps 3 and 4 when I'm discussing an entire treatment plan." So huge thank you to you.
Thank you.
You've mentioned leave behinds a couple times now. Do you think they're a good idea? And if so, what do you recommend that be?
I like to see the leave behind be the talk piece, the visual that you've talked through, and maybe there's a place for some notes on there. But to me, our websites are the leave behind. So direct them to the website. And one thing I've learned from Bill Purnett, who's taught me so much about selling, it's really the number one reason why my business is doing so well. And he said, always set that next date. So whenever I meet with a prospect, the last thing I do is get another date on the calendar. And from Dale, I learned never just send out a proposal. A proposal should be just confirmation of that conversation. So I always have a meeting if I'm presenting the proposal too. Lori. Can we get him? Oh, Karen.
Yeah, I want to just tag with Dan. I feel kind of sorry for Cynthia because she kept trying to tell me how I could do something better. We would do a Joy of Goals workshop every year and give out a 3-ring binder. And she kept trying to tell me how if we took it and put it in a spiral, it would be better. But of my age, I remember those spirals that weren't the ones that we use now, the coil ones, but those plastic ones, and I hated the idea. Finally, she just took my material and said, let me show you. And her show and tell convinced me. And it, I mean, really, that's how it was. She was like, I just got to show this woman. So, but it changed Joy of Goals. It changed our whole program by having a beautiful spiral binder.
Wonderful.
The spiral that is now the way we do spirals.
Lori. Oh.
So you talked a lot about how, the service-based businesses, this show and tell actually gives something tangible to show the client and walk through. But would you think that this would also apply for product-based businesses that are selling to dealers to talk about the process of how they will work with the dealer versus, yes, here's my product I can sell, but in that situation when it's business to business and not business to consumer, there's a whole process that goes through that as to how they will work together to get the product on the shelf. Would you recommend a visual like this as well when you're in those types of meetings or not?
Absolutely. In fact, when you say process, I'm thinking service. So with so many product sales, there's really a lot of service that gets combined with the product sales. So I think that's a great example. Yes.
Cynthia.
Rick.
Hi. Can you talk for a second about how testimonials might fit in to the show and tell concept?
Yes, so I love testimonials. I think it's the best way to understand the value of what you're offering. You can often find nuggets in those testimonials that you can use to help you build your value proposition. So just as I've used, this was my show and tell today to all of you. And just as I used some testimonials in there, I think they're extremely valuable. One of the pieces that I showed you actually had some testimonials at the bottom. So that's great. I'm out of time. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.